Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the common hotkeys used in command modern operations. Now believe it or not, there are a lot of hotkeys that you can utilize in this program, and one of the greatest things is if you ever get lost at which ones to use, if you go up to help, there's a little button that actually says hotkeys. So you can actually open that sucker up and it'll take you to a place where you can actually take a look at a lot of the different buttons that you're going to need. Now the question I was asked on a recent live stream is, what are the common hotkeys that you find yourself using all the time? Well, the first one that I'm always using is spacebar. Spacebar is going to be the one that actually starts and stops your actual running here. Believe it or not, you can also press Control Enter if you're so inclined. But spacebar, I can't tell you how often. Like my left hand is basically that thumb is ready to go on that one at a moment's notice. The other thing that really helps is changing your time compression. Now, I'm a person who likes to use plus and minus on the numpad with my right hand, but some people, of course, like to use it by pressing plus a bunch of times. You can speed up all the way to double fire. If you press minus a bunch of times, it drops it all over. Now, one of the coolest tricks here is if you go, oh God, just press the Enter key, and it immediately snaps it back to 1x. So that's a pretty helpful little tip there that you can use. The next one that I'm using all the time is Control and S. The warning of Control S, by the way, is we're currently sitting here in the scenario editor. If I were to press Control S, what I'd actually be doing is I'd be saving the scenario at this exact moment, which means my beautiful scenario file has now been overwritten. So watch out for that one. The next one is one that I don't use very often, but I actually find it to be pretty helpful. And that's the ability to basically add units to a quick button. So for example, if I click on Homestead Air Force Base, if I press Control and then 1 on my keyboard, as you can see, I got Karnak going today. Now, if I come over here and click over here, I'm in the middle, I'm looking at these look like pretty islands. If I press the number 1 on my keyboard, boing, it instantly will snap me back to that particular view, which is a super duper duper handy there if you have a specific unit. Again, I can take my little ANFPS 20A there, hit Control 2 and go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, again, you can have a lot of fun with that if that is something you are so inclined to do here. So those are both very, very helpful keys. You can actually do Z and X if you want to zoom in and out if you want. To be honest, though, I just take the mouse and use the scroll wheel for that. And of course, right click and drag is going to do one of those pieces as well. The next thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at all the stuff that we like to use as far as using different types of reference points. Now, if you press Control and you right-click anywhere on the map, it's going to bring up a handy-dandy little context menu that's going to be dependent on what's going on. One that you see, of course, I'm in the scenario editor, so Insert and Control Insert gives me the ability to edit things. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add reference point. So you'll see that it turns into a finger, so I can go ahead and click and get myself a deselected reference point. Now, if I press Control Insert just on its own again, as you can see in the bottom corner, I can go there and actually create my reference points directly. Now, the cool thing about reference points is if I go ahead and select both of these, what you're going to have here is you're going to have my waypoints basically ready to rock, let's go. If I want to delete a reference point, you press Control and Delete. Notice it deleted all of the reference points that I had selected. So for example, if I only have RP284, Control D, it's gone. So that's kind of something you want to kind of be mindful of when you're actually pressing the buttons. Now, one of the other tips I really, really like to use, and I recommend this, is Control End. And what that will do is that will instantly deselect all reference points at the same time. The reason this is super duper helpful is because if you're doing one of these, you're like, I want to create a new area, Control End, bam, I'm ready to go. I don't have to really worry about any of those components. The next command that I'm probably using way more than I ever should need is Control D. And what that will do is that will go ahead and give you the range and bearing tool. Of course, you've seen me use this thing so many times. I swear that I have like spacebar and Control D are like completely worn out on my keyboard kind of a thing because they're so useful. One of the nice things about this is wherever you click, it picks up where you went from. So for example, if I want to measure from this point to this point, that's 55. If I want to measure from this point to this place down here, I can see immediately where it is, and it actually works really, really well. So the next set of points and buttons we're going to see here is basically going to be linked to our handy-dandy message log. Now, believe it or not, there shouldn't really be anything in here other than it's going to tell me that I switched side here. But if you want to pop this out just for convenience sake, you can actually press Control-Shift-M, and it will pop that sucker out so that it actually is its own page. Now, the reason that's so incredibly useful here is if you want to switch to raw mode, which is like the OG commando mode of doing things, you can actually do that. You can also press Control-M, and it'll actually clean the entire log out if that is something that you need to do. Now, when it comes to scenario editor, I'm going to skip all those commands because those are going to be things for a different point. And instead, we're now actually going to take a look at the commands for getting some units and sort of actions sort of going here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and press run my scenario here. I'll take advantage of all my new learning. Kind of run it for a bit, run it for a bit. We'll give it some real... Oh, pause! What's this? We have some incoming targets. Now, these are all coming right from us from Cuba, so I think it's pretty safe to assume that they're probably not of the friendly variety here. But believe it or not, when new bogeys are identified, or skunks, or goblins, or anything like that, you can actually click on them and you can press a button to define what type of target you expect this to be. For me, 99% of the time, I'm pressing H, which is immediately going to flag this guy saying, hey, the thing that you have right here is actually friendly. Now, if I press N, I'd be flagging it as neutral. Keep in mind, if I re-identify this thing as something that's actually dangerous, they'll override that particular component. Now, if you press Control H, interestingly enough, you can actually flag something as unfriendly. Pressing F brings it all the way up to friendly. Keep in mind, it doesn't make this guy friendly. I promise you, this guy is probably not very friendly. But the cool thing that we have here is I can actually do all those different components. So I'll go ahead and mark him as hostile. Now, interestingly enough, you can rename enemy contacts. This is one of those interesting little things that people probably have missed, and they've played Command for years, sort of a thing. But the reason this is super duper helpful is you can actually come in here, and for example, I can put an asterisk here. And what that's doing is that's just reminding me that that particular target has been identified, and I usually use that little asterisk as a way to remind me that I've already launched an intercept mission against it, for example, so you know exactly what I'm doing. Just kind of a neat little, just your pro tip for the day. Maybe you didn't know that one, kind of a thing like that. So I'm going to go ahead and drag all these and press the H key. Now, another fun button, to be honest, I think Belugan is the only one who ever uses it, I swear, is if you press the T key. So what the T key does is it auto-tracks a unit. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can actually see that as this unit gets its position updated, my world is actually updating itself along with that particular track as it's starting to change. Go ahead and pause there. Now, that's kind of fun to play with. Like if you have a satellite and it's at really, really high altitude, you can ride it around. Again, the original, is like I kind of jokingly say in that particular case. The next thing we're going to take a look at, of course, is going to be the other one that I'm using all the time, and that is going to be Doctrine and WRA. Now, there's so many different ways you could do this. You could, of course, come up here and actually go to the settings and click on it, or you can press Control Shift F9. And what that will do is that will bring up your doctrine and rules of engagement for your entire side. The reason I like this so much is it's so much simpler to just bang that key out than it is to run up here and press that button that you have up here. I use this one a lot. Some people say, but what about Control F9? Well, Control F9 is for individual units. It's the equivalent of coming up here and I'm mangling one of those buttons there. The next button we'll take a look at is one that I find myself kind of like when we're in the zone using quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this group of targets, press Control F11, and that will allow you to basically create a quick mission. Intercept this SVP. That's definitely what I want to do. I'll press the OK key for that particular one. And now we can go ahead and define all the different components. Obviously, we're going to be launching all these guys, because why not? Mission settings, we'll do groups of 4. I don't want to change any of that. WRA, obviously we want them to prioritize bombers, targeting priority. Create, we're going to be smart about this, like do things actually correctly. Target bombers first. Bunk. Everything else, though, can obviously be attacked. But that's just one of those quick little, another pro tip for you. I'm just being so nice today. So one of the cool things we have here is they're basically going to run down there. Notice this is no targets, by the way. We want to add those on the map. And they'll also flag them as hostile, by the way, so I'll just kind of be mindful of that. Now, the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to get a bunch of airplanes in the air so we could start doing the shenanigans and going ons right away. Come on. There they go. Fantastic. Oh. Negative radar contact. Procedural control only. Maintain all separation. Now, what I have here is I have a unit that is just launched. And what I'm actually going to do is I'll grab onto them and tap that T key for track mode. So one of the common problems, and this is a common complaint, is my little group here has now been launched, and they're definitely flying in their way over to the targets, is that we have a bunch of group members here, and I can only select one of the group members. I'm actually selecting the whole group at once. One of the most common questions I get is people ask me, well, how do I get group members to not hang out with the rest of the group, be losers, kind of a thing like that, like me. So what I like to do is, there's a couple things you can do. First is if you tap 9 on the numpad, what that will actually do is switch to group member mode so that everybody is an individual unit. So now if I click on this guy, for example, you notice, by the way, track mode never exited. I can actually click on these guys individually, and I can actually see exactly who they are and all sorts of different details, independent of the rest of the crew. If I click this guy, for example, you'll see that I've got this is number 3. You can see it's an F102. Now, let me say I want to break this guy off the rest of this group for some reason. If I press the D key, that will cause them to automatically break. And of course, when you do this, I'm going to go ahead and press the number 9 again on the keyboard. You will see that this unit is now independent of the other units inside of the group. Now, if I wanted to regroup them, I could select the whole thing and press the G key, which will slam those two groups back together, and then they're going to reassume the mission that they have to be on. You'll see here that they're back on the intercept mission that we wanted a minute ago. Now, some people say, what if I want to break up this entire group? Oh, you just have to press the delete key. I'm not going to do that right now because you can trust that it works perfectly fine. But one of the other questions a lot of people say is what happens if you want a group to stop going towards a particular target? Well, the good news is this is relatively straightforward to do. If I simply select a unit, I can right click on them and I can actually unassign them. And if you notice here, the hotkey for this is the U key. If I press that button, you'll notice they immediately are going, okay, and they're no longer assigned. So if I wanted to, I could actually go F1 and go zip in there and I'd do my deed there if that's something that I needed to do. But one of the cool things that we can do with that now is I can actually come back here, assign to mission, and I can go back to intercept. So that unassigned group now is going to go back to it. Now, one of the things that people use that for all the time is in the event that they order RTB. So if I click on this unit here, for example, and press on B, see how they're all turning around and going home? I don't want them to do that. So I'm going to unassign them, and then I'm going to reassign them back to the mission. And they're right back on, just like that. And that's a handy little method if you accidentally, so to speak, like that. So we have a lot of different options here. One other option I like to use too is called P, which drops a contact. So like this one, for example, I just press P and drops it completely. The nice thing about that, of course, is once I've dropped the contact, I can now reacquire it. So if things are getting very, very cluttered and I'm not sure what's going on, I can use that as a very, very safe way to sort of engage these different components. So that's basically it for primary hotkeys. Again, if you go up to editor and hit, help and press hotkeys, it'll bring up a handy dandy menu that will provide you with everything else that you could possibly use here. I like those things. It, again, makes this game much more easy to play, kind of being aware of them. But at the end of the day, it's like what do you use the most? Spacebar plus minus. But that's just me. Enjoy.